Good morning and welcome to the March 2022 open meeting of the Federal Communications Commission, where we are celebrating Women's History Month. And we have those in Ukraine in our hearts and minds, especially those in the media and journalists covering the war and providing us with the news and information we need to know. Now, this meeting is a little bit different. It's the first one we're having in person since the pandemic began. And it's the first one we're holding at the new FCC headquarters. We hope to use today's open meeting as a first step towards welcoming the agency and the public into our new building. And with that said, Madam Secretary, would you please introduce the agenda this morning?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Good morning to you and good morning, Commissioners. For today's meeting, you will hear 4 items for your consideration. First, you will consider a notice of inquiry that would commence a proceeding to prevent and eliminate digital discrimination and ensure that all people of the United States benefit from equal access to broadband internet access service, consistent with Congress' direction in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Second, you will consider a further notice of proposed rulemaking that would seek comment on questions concerning the allocation of pole replacement costs between utilities and attachers and ways to expedite the resolution of pole replacement disputes. Third, you will consider a public notice announcing the 4th and final round of selections for the Commission's Connected Care pilot program to provide universal service fund support for healthcare providers making connected care services available directly to patients. Fourth, you will consider a national security matter. Please note item 4, a restricted adjudicatory matter from the Media Bureau, as listed on the Commission's March 9th Sunshine Notice, has been adopted by the Commission and deleted from today's agenda. The first item on your agenda, entitled Preventing Digital Discrimination, will be presented by Dewana Terry, head of the FCC's Task Force to Prevent Digital Discrimination.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Ms. Terry, please proceed.
Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. The Task Force to Prevent Digital Discrimination and the Wireline Competition Bureau are pleased to present for your consideration a notice of inquiry that would, if adopted, commence a proceeding to ensure that everyone benefits from equal access to broadband internet access service and to prevent digital discrimination of such access consistent with Congress's directive in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. I would like to thank the Wireline Competition Bureau team for their collaboration and hard work. I also would like to thank our colleagues in the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau, the Enforcement Bureau, the International Bureau, the Media Bureau, the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau, the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau, the Office of Communications Business Opportunities, the Office of Economics and Analytics, the Office of General Counsel, and the Office of Managing Director for their contribution to this cross-agency effort. Presenting the item today is Emily Kaditz, Attorney Advisor from the Wireline Competition Bureau's Competition Policy Division. Emily will now present the item.
Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. Congress and the Commission have identified that access to broadband must be a national priority, as the need for high-quality, affordable broadband has never been greater than it is today. Congress tasked the Commission in Section 60506 of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act to take steps to ensure equal access to broadband and prevent and eliminate digital discrimination. This notice of inquiry, if adopted, would invite comment on how to construe and give meaning to the statutory language. It would seek comment on how to interpret the phrase equal access and how the Commission should facilitate equal access to broadband. The notice of inquiry would also seek comment on how the Commission should understand what digital discrimination means, as well as how to identify when and where digital discrimination is occurring. And it would seek comment on what steps the Commission should take to prevent and eliminate digital discrimination based on income level, race, ethnicity, color, religion, or national origin, and whether the Commission should address digital discrimination based on any other characteristics beyond those enumerated in the Infrastructure Act. The notice of inquiry would also ask how the Commission should revise its public complaint process to accept complaints related to digital discrimination as directed in the Infrastructure Act. In addressing these topics, the notice of inquiry, if adopted, would seek comment on what data the Commission should rely on in this proceeding, as well as other action the Commission should take to prevent and eliminate digital discrimination. The task force and the Bureau recommend adoption of this notice of inquiry and request editorial privileges. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now hear comments from the bench, and we will start with Commissioner Carr.
Well, thank you so much. I want to start by echoing the chairwoman's words of thoughts and prayers and expressions of gratitude for all the journalists and reporters that are out there literally in harm's way, bringing us accurate news and information out of Ukraine right now. So I wanted to echo the thoughts that she expressed there. Separately, it's also very good to be here in person with all of you. I enjoy the digital world, but it's great to be in the real world with you as well. I don't really recognize Commissioner Starks without his brick background, or Commissioner Symington without his fake garden behind it, but it really is good to be with all of you in person, and I'll end my my shtick there. Turning to the item before us, today we do take another important step towards implementing the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act. And I think we do so mindful of the statutory obligation or directive that we're all very aware of, which is working to end the digital divide in this country, of making sure that every single family, every single community has a fair shot at an affordable next generation connection. And as we work to implement this Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, I think we do so mindful of the broader funding that has been made available. Really, this is an unprecedented down payment by the federal government to hopefully once and for all end the digital divide. And whether it's the $65 billion that we have through the Infrastructure Act, or if you step back, by my count, we have about $800 billion available across a range of different agencies for infrastructure projects that could be used for broadband infrastructure. I think if we get the right policies in place, the right framework in place, this is the funding that is going to allow us to fully and finally end the digital divide and make sure that we deliver on that goal and that directive of making sure every single American, every family has an affordable connection. So I look forward to our broad work to implement this act and to end the digital divide. And I'll be approving. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Carr. Commissioner Starks.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I also echo those sentiments from the Chairwoman, obviously foot-stomped by Commissioner Carr, that bringing accurate information has never been more important. And the media that is hard at work there in Ukraine have my thoughts and prayers as well. It is as well good to be back, Madam Chairwoman. Thank you for organizing us. I know many folks around the Commission have thought hard about how to have us here today, and so I deeply appreciate those efforts as well. And thank you for dressing up, Commissioner Carr. Good to see you back in a tie. Certain forms of discrimination in the United States have an established history, context, and pattern. Digital discrimination, in contrast, is not as well defined. In fact, Congress has given this agency the heavy task of outlining and understanding its root causes and ultimately implementing the rules necessary to prevent and eliminate digital discrimination based upon income, level, race, ethnicity, color, religion, and national origin. The notice of inquiry we adopt here today is the start. While we are laying a foundation for rules preventing and eliminating digital discrimination, we must remember the people who are counting on us to get this right. For millions of vulnerable Americans, the lived experience of digital discrimination can take many forms. It could mean struggling to find basic connectivity while wealthier neighborhoods across town get faster and faster service. It could mean living in an apartment building some providers simply won't serve, even as they wire buildings just down the street. But one thing is very clear. These Americans intuitively feel that something is not right. Something is not working. Digital discrimination has consequences. Just last week, I met with a group of public housing authorities who are working hard to close the digital divide in their communities. They talked about the transformative impact broadband has had in their communities, bringing with it economic, educational, and social opportunities that every American should have. And where the promise of broadband remains unfulfilled, too many neighborhoods remain on the outside looking in, knowing that they are missing out on the connections that would improve their lives. Today, we start the hard work needed to change that. I thank the chair and my colleagues for incorporating some of my suggestions into this item. In particular, we will seek comment about making our complaint process accessible to those who have been directly harmed by these practices. To effectively prevent and eliminate digital discrimination, we will need the public's help. Digital discrimination and the disconnection it causes is particularly insidious because it robs its victims of many of the tools to do something about it. Our complaint process must be straightforward, transparent, well-publicized, and easily accessible to those with poor or no connectivity. Lastly, I'll close. I'm grateful to the many congressional leaders, particularly Congresswoman Yvette Clarke, who championed this issue, positioned the FCC to be able to take action, and of course, as well, the commission staff for preparing this notice. It has my full support, and I look forward to reviewing the record. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Starks. Well put. Commissioner Symington.
Thank you. I'd like to join my colleagues in expressing my support as well for journalists serving under difficult conditions abroad, bringing us accurate information and thus allowing us to know exactly what is going on in the current military activity in Eastern Europe. And of course, to express my happiness at finally taking the dais for the first time, albeit quite some time after first taking office, which is probably without precedent. So, with respect to this item, in Section 60506 of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, Congress mandated that the Commission adopt rules to ensure equal access to broadband internet and to prohibit discrimination in the deployment of broadband infrastructure. Historical discrimination against geographically clustered populations in infrastructure development is well attested. So now we propose to look at it in a systematic way and determine specific actionable criteria so that complaints can be addressed promptly and effectively. What's more, even in particular cases where development has finally caught up, these disparities have in some cases left a lasting legacy in thwarted potential, daily inconvenience, and even foreclosure from jobs and healthcare options. And in many cases, affected areas, and therefore the people who live there, remain burdened with old, inadequate technology even today. Congress has responded to these complaints about access, and today we are undertaking the inquiry mandated by Congress. So I'm happy that beginning with this item, we are taking steps to make sure that such discrimination is no longer occurring and to identify cases where it nevertheless persists. I therefore support the item as a necessary step toward equity and welcome the Commission's further action in support and fulfillment of Congress's mandate. Laws reach into the future and have lasting, potentially unintended impacts, and once an agency begins making rules, the rules can take on a momentum of their own. This notice of inquiry properly considers undisputed cases of past and ongoing discrimination. In drafting the law motivating this notice of inquiry, however, Congress required that we address specific cases, but did not require that we restrict the scope of our inquiry and did not state that it was the only area of possible or appropriate concern. I will proceed to discuss one such area of concern, although I'm sure that others exist as well and will hopefully be put on the record accordingly. So far, the United States has yet to systematically consider the question of customers getting fired, so to speak, a situation that makes, in some cases, people afraid to speak their minds or advocate on behalf of their convictions. Outside of the United States, it's not unusual for there to be laws passed restricting dissent that may be labeled, sometimes with very good reason, misinformation, extremist, or hateful. Of course, in the United States, the First Amendment prevents this. Nonetheless, private pressure and criticism can be brought to bear to encourage deplatforming or other service denial. And where there's no state nexus or facilities basis, it seems that under present law, this is not germane to our statute or to Congress's intent in this specific bill. However, I suspect that broadband providers, which are much more regulated and thus have a much greater nexus with the state, have come and will come under similar pressures to terminate and otherwise discriminate against customers who host or provide controversial content through their broadband connections. And I fear that just like other companies, they will find pressure from politicians and political activists increasingly difficult to resist. It's hard to imagine internet service providers refusing to build out to politically unpopular areas because of a lack of geographic nexus. But it's not necessarily so difficult to imagine unpopular customers being fired by their ISPs or carriers. Under the statute that this item begins to implement, the Commission is tasked with ensuring equal access to broadband internet. Congress has explicitly required us to address certain facets of equal access by preventing discrimination based on protected characteristics. And that is clearly what this law and this item is about. But looking to Congress's carefully written text into the future of the Infrastructure Act, Congress has also given us the authority to determine what else should be done to ensure equal access for all. In the notice we adopt today, we are inviting comment on the scope of this question, whether in addition to the civil rights matters mandated under the statute, there exist other areas of significant actual or potential discrimination. Together with its gains for civil rights, today's notice of inquiry is also an opportunity for stakeholders, whether institutional, experts, or the American public at large, to tell the American government about their experience and views on discrimination and begin talking about solutions.
Thank you, Commissioners. In the very first sentence of the Communications Act, Congress directs the Federal Communications Commission to help make communications services available to all the people of the United States without discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, national origin, or sex. This language is not new, but it is time to address it with new urgency. That's because we are at the end days of a pandemic that has demonstrated that the digital divide in this country is very real. There are too many places where high-speed communications networks do not reach. There are too many people who don't have the connections they need to fully participate in modern civic and commercial life. And there are too many of us that have for too long been underserved and overlooked. We can fix this. We need to. It's about equity, opportunity, and making it possible for everyone to have a fair shot at 21st century success. It is also about the law, because in addition to the very first sentence of the Communications Act, we now have new directives in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. The headline here, of course, is the $65 billion investment we're making in broadband nationwide. And that includes the $14.2 billion Affordable Connectivity Program that the FCC is responsible for, and that is now helping more than 10 million low-income households nationwide. But there's more. That's because Section 6506 of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act directs us to ensure that all people of the United States benefit from equal access to broadband. It requires us to issue rules that facilitate this equal access by preventing and eliminating digital discrimination on the basis of income level, race, ethnicity, color, religion, or national origin. This is a tall task, but we're going to do it because we need connections, physical and digital, that strengthen our mutual bonds. So with this proceeding, we seek to identify the policies and practices that can lead to digital discrimination. Recognizing this won't be easy, we are going to do it in a thoughtful way, starting with today's notice of inquiry. We ask how we should define digital discrimination and seek data and analytics to help inform our understanding of when, where, and why it happens. To do this, we need input from stakeholders far and wide, from the public, from state, local, and tribal governments, from public interest advocates, from academics, from the private sector, and from anyone else with information and ideas. The law also charges us with creating model policies and best practices for states and localities to help them take action to prevent digital discrimination in their communities. In addition, it directs us to coordinate with the Attorney General to make sure that federal policies support equal access for broadband. The questions we ask about these elements of the law are going to shape our work going forward. This proceeding is a top priority for the FCC, and it is led by three dynamos from our staff, Dwana Terry, Sanford Williams, and Alejandro Roark, who run the task force to prevent digital discrimination. But our efforts do not stop here. We rechartered the Communications Equity and Diversity Council and expanded its mission beyond media to include diversity and equity issues across the technology sector. This group is also helping us develop the model policies for state and localities that are required under this law. Plus, we have made it a regular practice to seek comment on how the rulemakings we initiate impact diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. And these actions are consistent with the principles in Executive Order 13985, advancing racial equity and support for underserved communities through the federal government, which we have used to guide and inform our work. John Lewis said, "Every generation leaves behind a legacy. What that legacy will be determined by the people of that generation." What legacy do you want to leave behind? I'm the first woman ever confirmed as chair of the FCC, so here's what I want to leave behind. A diverse agency that is more committed than ever before to realizing the power of broadband for all. I believe this goal is now within reach, so let's use this proceeding to help make it happen. Thank you to the team responsible for this effort, including, as I just noted, Dwana Terry, Sanford Williams, and Alejandro Roark of the Task Force to Prevent Digital Discrimination, as well as, and it's an all-hands effort, Pam Arlick, Emily Kaditz, Matt Collins, Adam Copeland, Rashawn Duval, CJ Ferraro, Trent Harkrader, and Oriel Mathieu, as well as Chris Monteith of the Wireline Competition Bureau, Ed Bartholomé, Diane Burstein, Emmett Carlson, Matthew Duchesne, Barbara Esben, Aaron Garza, Kayla Hernandez-Ulloa, Theodore Marcus, Sayuri Rajapaksa, Susie Rosen-Singleton, and Kimberly Wild of the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau, Kara Grayer, Maura McGowan, Joy Ragsdale, and Carolyn Williams of the Office of Communications Business Opportunities, Amy Brett, Garnet Hanley, Carrie Hicks, and Susanna Larson of the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau, Jamila Best Johnson, Hillary DeNegro, and Brendan Holland of the Media Bureau, Michael Karowitz, Pamela Gallant, Jeffrey G., Kellen Lee, Janet Moran, and Ashley Tyson of the Enforcement Bureau, Neshe Gundelsberger of the International Bureau, David Firth, Lauren Kravitz, and Nicole McGinnis of the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau, Eugene Kiselev, Eric Ralph, and Stephen Rosenberg of the Office of Economics and Analytics, Thomas Buckley, Daniel Daly, Jay Song, and Mark Stevens of the Office of Managing Director, and Marlena Barzilai, Michelle Ellison, Rick Mallon, Linda Oliver, and Bill Richardson of the Office of General Counsel. And with that, we will proceed to a vote on the item. Commissioner Carr.
Approve.
Commissioner Starks.
Approve.
Commissioner Symington.
Approve.
The chair votes aye. The item is adopted with editorial privileges as requested. Madam Secretary, please announce the next item on today's agenda.
Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners, the second Wireline Competition Bureau item on your agenda is entitled Resolving Pole Replacement Disputes, and Trent Harkrader, Chief of the Bureau, will give the introduction.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Mr. Harkrader, first outing as Bureau Chief. Please proceed.
It's my pleasure. Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and my friend commissioners. The Wireline Competition Bureau is pleased to present for your consideration a second further notice of proposed rulemaking that, if adopted, would continue the Commission's efforts to speed the timing and reduce the cost of access to broadband infrastructure. I'd really like to thank the Bureau team for their hard work on this item, as well as the teams from our friends and colleagues in the Office of Economics and Analytics, the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau, the Enforcement Bureau, and of course, the Office of General Counsel. Mike Ray, Attorney Advisor in the Bureau's Competition Policy Division, will now present the item. Over to you, Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Trent. Good morning to you. And good morning to you, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. So today's second further notice of proposed rulemaking, if adopted, would seek comment on whether further reforms to the Commission's rules are necessary to provide regulatory certainty with regard to pole replacements. First, the item seeks comment on who should be required to pay the cost of a pole replacement when that replacement is not necessitated solely by a new attachment request, and asks whether and to what extent utilities directly benefit from various types of pole replacements, and if the Commission should establish standards for when utilities should be required to pay a proportional share of pole replacement costs. Second, the further notice asks how to allocate costs between utilities and attachers when a pole replacement is necessary to accommodate both a new attachment and for reasons that are attributable to the utility. Third, what are the economic, practical, and legal issues that the Commission would need to consider when revising its rules to require utilities and attachers to share the cost of pole replacements in certain circumstances. And fourth, the item asks about the data and information necessary to evaluate who should share in the cost of early retirement pole replacements. Now, the second further notice also seeks comment on whether the Commission should adopt additional measures to avoid or quickly resolve pole replacement disputes, such as a requirement to share information concerning the condition of and replacement plans for poles, and whether the Commission should announce policies favoring placing certain pole attachment complaints on the accelerated docket. Finally, the item seeks comment on whether the Commission should consider changes to its rules to provide greater clarity concerning the scope of refunds available when it determines that a pole attachment rate, term, or condition is unjust and unreasonable. The Wireline Competition Bureau recommends adoption of this second further notice of proposed rulemaking and requests editorial privileges. Thanks.
Thank you. We will now hear comments from the bench. Commissioner Carr.
Thanks. 1 year ago this week, I gave a speech at AEI where I laid out a series of steps the Commission could take to extend U.S. leadership in 5G. I identified actions on both spectrum and infrastructure that would match the pace and cadence that the agency had been moving on those fronts. One idea I offered up was for the FCC to make sure that our cost-sharing rules for pole replacements aren't inhibiting internet builds, particularly in unserved areas. After all, the more clarity we can provide with regard to pole replacements, the faster access to poles can be granted, and in turn, the faster families can get connected. In that speech, I said we could do this through a notice of proposed rulemaking that would seek comment on issues raised in a July 2020 petition. So I'm very pleased that we're taking precisely that action today, whether I called for it or not, with today's vote. Taking action now is particularly important in light of the unique opportunity we have in front of us to end the digital divide. As I noted in my prior statement, whether it's the $65 billion for broadband in the bipartisan infrastructure bill or the hundreds of billions of dollars available across various agencies, we have this unique opportunity to ensure that every American has a fair shot at an affordable internet connection. Now, one way that federal and state governments alike could squander this opportunity is by allowing these dollars to get caught up in red tape and by unnecessary fees and charges. After all, if the government is just spending broadband dollars without streamlining infrastructure rules, then it's just stepping on the gas and the brakes at the same time. Specific to pole attachments, there's even more we can do to avoid that outcome. For instance, I continue to hear concerns from broadband builders about unnecessary delays when they seek to attach poles that are owned by municipal or cooperative utilities. Unlike what we're doing in today's item, there's a strong argument that Section 224 doesn't give us the authority to address issues specific to those types of poles. Therefore, I encourage states and Congress to take a closer look at these issues and revisit the exemption, perhaps, that exists in Section 224 so that we can ensure deployment is streamlined, regardless of the type of pole you're attaching to. As part of the FCC's continued efforts to close the digital divide, we should also look at ways that we can continue to streamline the rules of the road for fiber and other high-speed wired deployments. After all, during the prior administration, the FCC took steps to ensure that the fees charged for placing small wireless facilities in the rights-of-way do not violate Section 253. So I think we should begin to explore similar action for the deployment of other wired infrastructure to ensure that the funding being made available by Congress and the FCC goes into the ground and towards connecting families. Finally, we should make sure that all our policies are going to encourage private sector investment in infrastructure. We must reject calls for government-subsidized overbuilding, which jeopardizes the operations of businesses that risk their own capital to serve local communities. Instead, we need to make sure that funding is directed to communities that still remain on the wrong side of the digital divide, rather than those that are already benefiting from a high-speed internet connection today. In closing, I want to thank the staff of the Wireline Bureau for their hard work on this item. It has my support, and I'll be voting to approve. Thanks.
Commissioner Starks.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. No particular statement from me. I will be approving this item. I think obviously asking these questions, getting it right on the allocation of pole replacement costs, in particular with utilities, attachers, is going to be very important. So this has my support.
Short and sweet. I like it. Commissioner Symington.
Thank you, and thank you to the staff of the Wireline Bureau for their hard work on this item. I'm happy that we're looking into making the pole attachment regime fairer by more equitably allocating costs of pole replacements and improvements. But one thing that has struck me about this area is how frequently utilities and attachers end up in protracted disputes that introduce financial uncertainty and hold up investment in broadband deployment. This is at least as big of a problem as whether the actual allocation of costs is fair, since it hurts not just one company or the other, but also entire communities by keeping them stuck on the wrong side of the digital divide while these disputes are working their way through. So I encourage my colleagues, industry, and community groups to focus their attention on how we can create more legal certainty and provide quicker dispute resolution for pole owners and attachers. After all, that's how we get broadband out to people. Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners. There was a time not that long ago when you could call broadband nice to have, not need to have. Those days are over. This pandemic has made it crystal clear that we need to connect everyone everywhere in this country, no matter who they are or where they live. And thanks to Congress, we now have the largest effort ever in the United States to do just that. We are, as you've heard before, investing $65 billion in broadband deployment, affordability, and availability through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. It's a big deal, on par with the investment made to connect the country with the interstate highway system in 1956. So we're going to make history, but to do it, the details matter. This rulemaking is all about those details, namely the hard work involved in deploying fiber optic cable. It's a complicated business. Networks need to be designed, rights of way need to be negotiated, and fiber optic cable needs to be attached to utility poles, which are often owned and controlled by the local electric company or telephone company. And some of the companies that are in the process of building broadband to unserved and underserved areas have told us that the cost of these pole attachments can make up as much as 1/3 of the cost of rural deployment. That's a lot. But that figure doesn't even include the time required to negotiate and strike agreements for access to each and every pole. The bottom line is we can't afford to have access to utility poles become an impediment to broadband deployment. We are about to invest billions in high-speed infrastructure nationwide. It's essential that we have policies in place that make sure these dollars are used in a cost-effective way and that pole attachment policies facilitate rather than impede broadband build-out. Now, Congress has long recognized that fair access to utility poles is important for the construction and maintenance of communications networks. That's why Section 224 of the Communications Act provides the FCC with authority to oversee the rates, terms, and conditions of pole attachments. We need to use this authority to ensure that communications providers have non-discriminatory access to this essential infrastructure, and it's especially important to do this right now as historic federal investments begin. That's why today we seek comment on changes to our rules governing pole attachments, and in particular, we ask about whether we need to provide greater clarity about whether a pole must be replaced before additional attachments are possible. We ask about how the cost of pole attachment replacements should be allocated between the pole owner and the attachers, and we ask about other economic and legal issues that may arise with pole replacements. We also ask if there are other reforms we can make to speed up the process for negotiations, because certainty is good for both the providers seeking to build broadband networks and for the owners of utility poles. Pole attachments and replacements don't always get the attention they deserve. They're not the most glamorous part of broadband deployment. Soaring rhetoric about connecting all rarely features these fixtures on the ground. But they are an essential part of our effort to ensure high-speed service reaches everyone everywhere across the country. And further work on this rulemaking, even the less glamorous parts. I want to thank Pam Arlick, Adam Copeland, Liz Drogula, Trent Harkrader, Chris Monteith, Michael Nemec, and Mike Ray of the Wireline Competition Bureau, Eugene Kiselev, Richard Kwiatkowski, Eric Ralph, and Emily Talaga of the Office of Economics and Analytics, Garnet Hanley, George Laris, and Belinda Nixon of the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau, Lisa Griffin, Rosemary McNerney, and Lisa Sachs of the Enforcement Bureau, and Marlena Barzilai, Rick Mallon, and Linda Oliver of the Office of General Counsel. We'll proceed to a vote on the item. Commissioner Carr.
Approve.
Commissioner Starks.
Approve.
Commissioner Symington.
Approve.
And the chair votes aye. The item is adopted with editorial privileges as requested. Madam Secretary, please announce the next item on today's agenda.
Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners, the next item entitled Selecting Final Round of Applicants for Connected Care Pilot Program will be introduced again by Mr. Harkrader.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Because item 3 involves pre-decisional awards, we're going to switch the order up just slightly, as the FCC has done in past cases that involve similar presentations at open meetings. As with all open meeting items, the Bureau circulated this to every commissioner at least 3 weeks ago. But there's a long-standing practice at the agency that we do not publicly disclose pre-decisional awards unless and until the commission decides to take action. For these types of items, that means the agency formally votes on the item. Then here's a brief presentation from the Bureau before proceeding to any statements that commissioners may have. This process ensures that these sensitive matters will not be publicly disclosed until the FCC has voted to take action. We are going to follow that precedent here. So we will now proceed directly to a vote on item 3. Commissioner Carr.
Approve.
Commissioner Starks.
Approve.
Commissioner Symington.
Approve.
The chair votes aye. The item's adopted with editorial privileges as requested. Mr. Harkrader, welcome back. And please proceed with presenting the item that was just adopted.
Good morning again, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners, and thank you for your consideration and your approval of today's public notice selecting a fourth and final round of projects to participate in the Connected Care Pilot Program. I'd like to thank the Bureau team for their hard work, as well as the Office of Economics and Analytics and the Office of General Counsel for their assistance in standing up this pilot program and creating the application review process. Matt Baker, Attorney Advisor in the Bureau, will now present the item. Matt, over to you.
Thank you, Trent. Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. With the adoption of today's public notice, the Commission selected a fourth and final round of projects to participate in the Connected Care Pilot Program. The Connected Care Pilot Program is a 3-year program for selected pilot projects for qualifying purchases necessary to provide connected care services, with a particular emphasis on providing connected care services to low-income and veteran patients. The projects selected in today's public notice were reviewed by the Bureau to determine whether they would treat a high number of low-income or veteran patients and treat specific medical conditions, as well as whether the applicants have experience providing telehealth services, whether they primarily seek funding for eligible services, and whether they are located in geographic areas most in need of universal service support for connected care. The selected projects will help to provide remote patient monitoring, diagnostic imaging, video visits, and other services for patients dealing with maternal health issues and high-risk pregnancies, mental health issues, opioid dependency, chronic conditions, and infectious diseases. These projects cover 16 applications in 15 states that are collectively seeking over $29 million in funding. With the adoption of today's public notice, the pilot program has selected 107 projects seeking more than $98 million from 40 states in the District of Columbia. In addition to selecting the final set of participants for the pilot program, today's public notice waives an administrative filing deadline for pilot program participants selected in January, June, and October 2021 to ensure that healthcare providers that are still providing crucial care during the COVID-19 pandemic will be able to meet pilot program deadlines. The selection of the projects in today's public notice furthers the goals of the pilot program to improve health outcomes through connected care, reduce healthcare costs for patients, facilities, and the healthcare system, and support the trend towards connected care everywhere. The Wireline Competition Bureau appreciates the Commission's adoption of today's public notice and the grant of editorial privileges. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now hear comments from the bench, and we're going to start with Commissioner Carr.
Thanks. 4 years ago, just last month, when I was on a trip to Mississippi with Senator Wicker, I heard about a small healthcare provider that served patients spread across a handful of rural towns in Sunflower County. The team at North Sunflower Medical Center was on the pioneering edge of a new trend in telehealth. Now, up to then, nearly all telehealth funding went towards connecting brick and mortar facilities. It was known as a hub and spoke model where, for instance, a a generalist in a small-town clinic could conduct a virtual consult with a specialist located in a much larger city over a high-speed video connection. It was a mode of telehealth that the FCC had long funded through our various telehealth programs, and it was delivering very important benefits to communities across the country. But the team at North Sunflower was trying something different. Rather than bringing patients into the facility after they got sick, they were remotely monitoring their conditions. For diabetes, for example, they would send patients home with an iPad and a Bluetooth-enabled blood glucose monitor. The idea was that by constantly monitoring patients, they could keep them healthier and out of the most expensive portion of the healthcare system, the emergency department. It was working. When I learned about this model, what we would later describe as the healthcare equivalent of shifting from Blockbuster to Netflix, I thought the FCC should start a pilot program to support this new trend. Of course, back then, in 2018, in those pre-COVID-19 days, we had no idea how vital providing care at a distance would become. But the legwork we put in to stand up a connected care pilot program ultimately created the foundation for the FCC's emergency COVID-19 telehealth program as well. I'm incredibly proud of the work the FCC's team put into these initiatives, and I've had the chance to see firsthand the difference that these programs are already making. Since 2018, I've had the opportunity to visit 48 different healthcare facilities across 24 states. These facilities have been using connected care technologies to address a number of healthcare needs, from diabetes to strokes, from mental health care to alternative pain management, from maternal care to pediatrics. Just last month, I had the opportunity to meet with a behavioral health services provider in Nevada that's using telehealth to provide mental health counseling. By offering video rather than in-person visits alone, the team there told me that they are reaching more people, including those that may be hesitant to show up in person at a physical facility. In fact, they're now using FCC funding to ramp up from essentially 0 telehealth visits before COVID to more than 2,800 every month. Similarly, in Miami, Florida, I had the opportunity to meet with a community healthcare provider that went from almost no telehealth visits in 2019 to over 90,000 such visits in 2020. And they've used FCC funding to send more than 500 connected kits to their low-income patients. The data they're already collecting shows that this has reduced hospital visits by 60% during the pandemic. In Perrysburg, Ohio, I visited a mental health and addiction services provider that's using telehealth as part of its outpatient treatment for opioid dependency and fetal alcohol symptoms. And these are just a handful of the stories that I've heard in recent years. And what's clear to me is that connected care offerings are not simply replacing in-person visits. Providers tell me that patients are staying healthier. They're seeing far fewer cancellations since patients don't need to worry about transportation or childcare that can result in a lot of last-minute cancellations and therefore missed opportunities for care. And many times they're able to provide better care because the video visits give doctors a glimpse into the patient's home life. With today's vote announcing the 4th and final set of pilot projects, we'll have made more than $98 million available to more than 100 entities in 39 states and the District of Columbia. This announcement is a culmination of years of hard work, and I want to thank the staff of the Wireline Bureau for their commitment and their dedication to this pilot program. Unlike a lot of the other work we do, you don't need some sort of Rube Goldberg theory to see how this is benefiting and impacting people, and we are already seeing that. But our work is not done yet. We'll need to monitor and track the data that comes in from these programs. After all, one of the original goals of the pilot is to provide further data about the value that connected care offerings provide to ensure their broader adoption. At the same time, we need to make sure that these services have a stable, long-term funding model. In my view, the portions of the healthcare industry that benefit from these technologies should be the ones that support the lion's share of the costs in the long run. So now's the time to have conversations about that type of transition and what it could look like. Furthermore, it's become clear that there's bipartisan support for legislative measures that may be necessary to keep the success that we've seen with telehealth going. For instance, there's long been a range of licensing and reimbursement issues that have held telehealth back prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. But in early 2020, HHS, with the urging from Congress, helped facilitate greater access to telehealth through the issuance of key waivers. For example, HHS allowed more types of providers to bill Medicare for telehealth services and granted waivers for the reimbursement of audio-only telehealth. While these waivers are set to expire at the end of the COVID-19 public health emergency declaration, we cannot afford a return to the status quo when the pandemic ends. We've made too much progress to move backwards. So for these reasons, I fully support the Connect for Health Act, which was reintroduced this year by Senators Brian Schatz and Senator Wicker in a group of 50 bipartisan senators, which would take a number of steps to ensure that more people have access to telehealth, including by removing geographic restrictions on telehealth services, allowing health centers and rural health clinics to provide telehealth on a continued basis after the pandemic, and giving the Secretary of HHS additional authority to waive telehealth restrictions. I also support the Protecting Rural Telehealth Access Act, which would extend many of the existing waivers. So in closing, I want to thank the staff again of the Wireline Bureau for their hard work on this item, for their continuing efforts to ensure that the Connected Care pilot program is a success, and this vote has my support. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Starks.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I also am pleased to approve today's order announcing this fourth and final selection of projects for the Connected Care pilot program. Like those selected in the prior rounds, the pilot projects announced today will expand access to connected care services in a wide variety of locations and healthcare settings. They'll address a range of medical conditions that include opioid dependency, maternal health and high-risk pregnancy, chronic and recurring conditions, and something that I have continued to foot stomp, that mental health is going to be extremely important coming out of the pandemic, and for those of us who continue to feel the pressures and the burdens of the pandemic. And so this is tremendous work by this pilot program. And equally importantly, the program will continue to focus on low-income people and veterans. And so I thank the Commission staff for their continued hard work in making the pilot program a success. Look forward to, of course, hearing the results of all the projects we have selected since January of 2021. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Symington.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the staff, the Chairwoman's office, and especially Commissioner Carr for their diligent work on this program. I'm happy to approve this last set of awards so that we can progress to supporting qualified providers and entities. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Telemedicine has moved into the mainstream. It is now an essential part of healthcare in rural communities, urban communities, and everything in between. These pandemic days have proven it. But even before they began, the FCC started an experiment. We created the Connected Care pilot program to explore how the expansion of services like remote patient monitoring, virtual visits, and video counseling were changing the nature of healthcare and system-wide demand for communications. Today, we announce our final round of selections for the Connected Care pilot program. We commit more than $29 million to 16 entities in 15 states for a range of services. They include Children's Hospital in Denver, which will provide remote patient monitoring to children suffering from medically complex conditions in Colorado and Wyoming. Christiana Care Health Services, which will offer prenatal remote monitoring in Delaware, and the Council of Athabascan Tribal Governments, which will provide video visits and remote treatment in rural Alaska. Since we began the award for this program last year, we've selected a total of 107 pilot projects and that serve 40 states and the District of Columbia. That's a lot of support for new ways to connect and improve care. Although this is the last set of participants we are announcing in this program, it is not the end. That's because we're going to be studying the award recipients in this program, the connections they used, and how they helped facilitate care. In fact, at the start of this effort, we announced we would produce a report when the 3-year pilot program is complete. But I don't think we should wait that long. So that's why I'm announcing a new study today. By this time next year, the FCC staff will develop an interim report about the lessons learned from this program and the COVID-19 telehealth program, which provided nearly $450 million in support for care during the pandemic. I look forward to this report informing our thinking about telemedicine going forward. One final note. On a personal level, I'm especially pleased that efforts to address maternal health and high-risk pregnancy are the focus of several of our awardees. We are the only industrialized country with a rising level of maternal mortality. That's unacceptable in every way. It's a situation that is not helped by the closure of obstetric facilities in so many rural areas. Moreover, for Black women, the situation is especially chilling. They have a maternal mortality rate that is nearly 3 times as high as other women. My goodness, we need to do better. So I'm glad that in several locations, including Virginia, Hawaii, Delaware, Alaska, and South Carolina, we have been able to use this program to support connected care for pregnancy monitoring and maternal health. I'm also hopeful that Senator Jackie Rosen and Representative G.K. Butterfield's Data Mapping to Save Moms Lives Act will become law soon. This legislation will incorporate maternal health data in our new broadband maps to help show how access to broadband and maternal health outcomes are related. It will provide more data for researchers and clinicians to help address this crisis. Finally, I want to thank Commissioner Carr for his early effort to establish this program. I also want to thank the staff who did the work that brought us to where we are today, including Matt Baker, Brian Boyle, Adam Copeland, Rashawn Duval, Abdel Iqab, Veronica Garcia-Uloa, Jody Griffin, Trent Harkrader, Clint Heifel, India McGee, Chris Monteith, Kiara Ortiz, Nick Page, Ryan Palmer, Najeen Sanjar, Joe Schlingingbaum, and Haley Steffen from the Wireline Competition Bureau, as well as Marlena Barcelay and Rick Mallon from the Office of General Counsel. Madam Secretary, please announce the next item on today's agenda.
Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners, item 4 on your agenda is a national security matter and will be presented by the International Bureau. Thomas Sullivan, Chief of the Bureau, will give the introduction.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Because this decision is a national security matter, we're going to switch the order up like the last item, and just as the FCC has done in past cases that involve similar presentations at an open meeting. As with all open meeting items, the Bureau circulated this to every commissioner at least 3 weeks ago, but there is a long-standing practice at the agency that we do not publicly disclose matters of national security unless and until the commission decides to take action. For these types of items, this means that the agency formally votes on the item, then hears a brief presentation from the Bureau before proceeding to any statements that the commissioners may have. This process ensures that these sensitive matters will not be publicly disclosed until the FCC has voted to take action. And we're going to follow that precedent here. So we will now proceed directly to a vote on item number 4. Commissioner Carr.
Approve.
Commissioner Starks.
Approve.
Commissioner Symington.
Approve.
The chair votes aye. The item is adopted with editorial privileges if requested. Mr. Sullivan, please proceed with introducing item 4 on today's agenda.
Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. The Commission has taken a number of targeted steps to protect the nation's communications infrastructure from potential security threats, and it continues those efforts today. The order on revocation and termination you just adopted revokes the domestic Section 214 authority of Pacific Networks and its wholly owned subsidiary, ComNet, and revokes and terminates their international Section 214 authority. The order finds that the present and future public interest, convenience, and necessity is no longer served by the company's retention of their Section 214 authority. I would like to thank our colleagues from the International Bureau, Enforcement Bureau, Wireline Competition Bureau, Wireless Telecommunications Bureau, Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau, Consumer and Government Affairs Bureau, Office of General Counsel, Office of Economics and Analytics, and Office of Engineering and Technology for their collaborative work on this item. Gabrielle Kim of the International Bureau will present the item.
Good morning, Chairwoman Rosenrosel and Commissioners. The findings and conclusions in the order on revocation and termination are based on the Commission's public interest analysis under Section 214 of the Communications Act and the totality of the record developed in this proceeding, which includes comments from the executive branch agencies and Pacific Networks and ComNet's filings responding to the order to show cause and institution order. On March 17, 2021, the Commission adopted an order instituting proceeding on revocation and termination, finding that Pacific Networks and ComNet had failed to rebut the serious concerns of the Commission and the executive branch regarding the retention of Section 214 authority in the United States. The Commission adopted procedures that allowed for Pacific Networks and ComNet, the executive branch agencies, and the public to present any remaining arguments or evidence in this matter. Based on the Commission's public interest analysis and the totality of the record evidence, the order on revocation and termination you have adopted finds that the public and future public interest, convenience, and necessity is no longer served by the company's retention of their Section 214 authority. First, the order finds that the companies are U.S. subsidiaries of a Chinese state-owned entity, and therefore they are subject to exploitation, influence, and control by the Chinese government, and are highly likely to be forced to comply with Chinese government requests without sufficient legal procedures subject to independent judicial oversight. Second, the national security environment with respect to China has changed since the Commission authorized the companies to provide telecommunication services in the United States. The order finds that in this new environment, the company's ownership and control by the Chinese government raise significant national security and law enforcement risks by providing opportunities for the companies, their parent entities and affiliates, and the Chinese government to access, monitor, store, and in some cases disrupt and/or misroute U.S. communications, which in turn allow them to engage in espionage and other harmful activities against the United States. Third, independent of these concerns, the company's conduct and representations to the Commission and Congress demonstrate a lack of trustworthiness and reliability that erodes the baseline level of trust that the Commission and other U.S. government agencies require of telecommunications carriers, given the critical nature of the provision of telecommunications service in the United States. Fourth, given the record evidence, the order finds that further mitigation would not address the significant national security and law enforcement concerns. The order therefore revokes the company's domestic and international Section 214 authority. Fifth, separate and apart from revocation, the order finds that the companies violated the 2009 Letter of Assurances with the executive branch agencies, compliance with which is an express condition of the company's international Section 214 authorizations. The order therefore terminates the company's international Section 214 authorizations. 6. Given the record evidence of significant national security and law enforcement risks concerning the company's Section 214 authority, the order will reclaim the 2 international signaling point codes that were provisionally assigned to ComNet in 2001 and in 2003, 60 days from the release date of the order. Finally, the order directs the companies to discontinue any domestic or international services that they provide pursuant to their Section 214 authority no longer than 60 days from the release of the order. The International Bureau requests editorial privileges for technical and conforming edits. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now hear comments from the bench, beginning with Commissioner Carr.
Thanks. In 2019, we took the then unprecedented step of blocking a wireless carrier that was owned and controlled by the communist regime in China from connecting to our network based on serious national security threats. That action was entirely justified by the record and by China's evolving efforts to use entities it controls to surveil persons within our borders, steal intellectual property, and engage in other nefarious acts. Indeed, after our decision to deny China Mobile's application, I said it was time for the FCC to engage in a top-to-bottom review of every entity that would do the bidding of Communist China. As a result, we launched proceedings that focused on several entities, including China Telecom, China Unicom, and the 2 providers at issue today, Pacific Networks and ComNet. Like those before them, we decide today to revoke the domestic and international Section 214 authority of Pacific Networks and ComNet. Our action, once again, is informed by the views submitted by the executive branch agencies with responsibility for national security reviews. They advise that Pacific Networks and ComNet are ultimately owned and controlled by a Chinese state-owned entity. And this raises significant national security and law enforcement risks due to their susceptibility to complying with China's surveillance laws. Indeed, our own review found that the company's continued access to U.S. telecom infrastructure creates opportunities for the Chinese government or other state-backed actors to engage in espionage by monitoring U.S. traffic. Our review also found that the company's conduct towards the Commission and Congress lacked trustworthiness and reliability. Today's action is an important one, and I'm pleased that we are bringing this proceeding to a close. But of course, there's more the FCC and the executive branch must do to address the threats that Communist China continues to pose. Here's just a couple of those actions. First, the FCC must ensure that our covered list stays up to date. And we can do this in several ways. For one, we should look at adding all of the entities that have had their Section 214 authorizations revoked. And that would mean adding China Telecom, China Unicom, as well as Pacific Networks and ComNet. After all, the executive branch agency's national security determinations in these proceedings appears to satisfy the statutory criteria for adding them to the covered list, as I've noted before. For another, we should work with the executive branch to get their official views on other entities and whether they should be added to our covered list. And this would include Shenzhen-based drone maker DJI. Second, we should move quickly to finalize and implement our work on the Secure Equipment Act. The FCC sought comment last year on closing a loophole that allows entities that pose an unacceptable national security threat to continue to get their gear approved by the FCC for use in the U.S. The Secure Equipment Act gives us additional authorities to close this loophole, and we should reach a final determination in that proceeding quickly. Third, as I and some of my colleagues have noted, it might be possible that carriers that have their Section 214 authorizations revoked based on national security concerns might be making an end run around that determination. In particular, they may be offering the same or similar services in a manner that doesn't require a Section 214 authorization, whether that's by offering services on a private carriage basis or providing data center or other services that don't necessarily require that type of FCC authorization. And this is not a development that we can afford to ignore. So here's one idea. I think the FCC should start a proceeding that examines whether we should prohibit regulated carriers from directly interconnecting with entities that pose a national security threat, regardless of whether those entities are providing services that require a Section 214 authorization. Fourth, as part of our ongoing top-to-bottom review, we should publish a list of every entity with an FCC license or authorization that is owned or controlled by Communist China. I would imagine at this point that that's a fairly lengthy list. This action would help ensure that a range of stakeholders can provide any relevant information or perspectives about national security threats that those entities may pose. Now, in closing, I want to thank the chairwoman again for bringing this item up for a vote and for the diligent work that she's been doing to help secure our communications infrastructure. I also want to express my thanks to the International Bureau staff for their hard work on this proceeding and others, and this decision has my support. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Starks.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Our network security has never been more important. As events in Ukraine continue to unfold, reports indicate that hackers acting on behalf of Russia are seeking to sabotage Ukraine's networks, utilizing both new ways of attacking critical infrastructure, financial, and government networks, both in cooperation with other hackers and on their own. While we have yet to see a coordinated attack on American networks, we cannot ignore the capabilities of Russian state actors, which one technology company estimates are responsible for nearly 60% of all state-sponsored cyber attacks. The Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, and the FBI recently issued a joint cybersecurity advisory urging organizations to take precautions against the destructive malware that has been used to target Ukrainian organizations, and CISA has updated its Shields Up webpage to include new cyber services and resources, recommendations, and information on how to protect critical assets. Just last week, I met with CISA's Executive Assistant Director for Cybersecurity to discuss these efforts and how our agencies can continue to work together to address threats to our nation's telecom networks. I'm proud to say that I think the FCC is stepping up. I support the chairwoman's efforts to expand our interagency cyber coordination and strengthen our data breach rules. I also strongly support our NOI seeking comment on security vulnerabilities of the Border Gateway Protocol, which bad actors can exploit to misroute traffic for monitoring or interception. And while Pacific Network and ComNet don't appear to have BGP misrouting capabilities, they pose a threat similar to their fellow Chinese carriers. Like China Unicom, China Telecom, and China Mobile, Pacific Networks and ComNet are ultimately owned by a Chinese state entity, are subject to the exploitation, influence, and control of the Chinese government, and as such, they are highly likely to be forced to comply with Chinese government requests, including accessing, monitoring, disrupting U.S. communications. Moreover, Pacific Networks and ComNet have failed to provide complete and accurate information to Congress and to the Commission. In total, the company's actions clearly demonstrate that they cannot be trusted to provide telecom service in the United States, and so I support today's action. And it was almost 3 years ago that we first acted against a Chinese carrier seeking to operate in the United States. Today's decision revokes the Section 214 authority for the last of the Chinese carriers in our country identified by Team Telecom. Taken as a whole, our actions have strengthened our national security, affirmed the FCC's statutory responsibility here to protect the national defense and the safety of life and property. Network security is national security. Today's action is another positive step, and clearly we must continue to rise to the challenges of the day. My thanks to the International Bureau and the other bureaus and offices that worked on this proceeding for their hard work. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Symington.
Thank you. The FCC recently engaged in a comprehensive assessment of telecom providers with connections to China. The FCC opened investigations into several carriers, including Pacific Networks and ComNet, to determine whether they pose a threat to our national security. Today, we take the next step towards concluding one of those important investigations. The Commission correctly concludes that Pacific Networks and ComNet, U.S. subsidiaries of a Chinese state-owned entity, are subject to exploitation, influence, and control by the Chinese government, and are likely to be forced to comply with Chinese government requests without sufficient legal procedures subject to independent judicial oversight. I support the Commission's determination to revoke Pacific Networks and ComNet's domestic authority and to revoke and terminate their international Section 214 authority. And I'd like to thank the staff of the International, Wireline Competition, and Enforcement Bureaus for their hard work. This item has my support.
Thank you. Communications networks depend on trust. It's fundamental. That's why during the past year, the FCC has made it a priority to increase trust with a series of initiatives to support network security. We kicked off the nation's first inquiry into Open RAN systems to foster a market for more diverse and secure communications equipment. We launched a first-of-its-kind program to remove insecure equipment from domestic networks. We proposed rules to update our equipment authorization practices to better align them with national security policies and ensure that the agency does not approve insecure equipment for importation or sale in the United States. With the record in this proceeding now complete, I'm pleased to announce that we will be moving forward with new rules shortly. We've also recharted the Communications Reliability, Security, and Interoperability Council with a 5G focus, and for the first time ever, it is being co-chaired by the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. And just last month, we launched an inquiry into Border Gateway Protocol security to explore internet routing vulnerabilities and strengthen the cybersecurity of communication services. At the same time, we took a close look at the foreign ownership of telecommunications companies providing service in the United States. Our efforts were informed by recommendations and work of our colleagues in national security agencies, and in several cases, they've determined that certain state-owned enterprises could be subject to exploitation, influence, and control by foreign governments. As a result, last year we revoked the authorizations of China Telecom Americas and China Unicom Americas to provide communications in the United States. Today, we continue that work and do the same for 2 additional companies identified by our national security colleagues, Pacific Networks Corp. And its wholly owned subsidiary, ComNet. As before, we take this action after providing the companies with appropriate due process, including multiple opportunities to explain why we should not revoke their domestic and international authorities. With these actions, we have a better understanding of security risks in our networks. Moreover, we have made it a priority to make these learnings public. At this time last year, we published the first ever list of communications equipment and services that pose an unacceptable risk to national security. This is known, of course, as our covered list. I'm pleased to report that, again, we're working closely with our national security partners to update this list and confirm the status of other companies that have been the subject of recent national security attention. We're going to have that update later this month. Because cybersecurity threats are always evolving, so is our work. And that's why earlier this year I shared with my colleagues a proposal to modernize our rules regarding data breach reporting. These rules were first adopted in 2007. It's time for an update. I look forward to the agency adopting this rulemaking without further delay because data breaches are increasing, and in response, we need to increase our efforts to restore network trust. Thank you to the staff who worked on today's decision, and it's a lot of them, including Stacy Ashton, Denise Coca, Kate Collins, Cole Dorsey, Francis Gutierrez, Jocelyn Jazermi, Gabrielle Kim, David Kretsch, Arthur Leckman, Wayne Layton, Adrian McNeil, Tom Sullivan, Troy Tanner, and Patrick Weber from the International Bureau, Ed Bartholomew and Alejandro Roark from the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau, Jeffrey G. and Pam Kane from the Enforcement Bureau, Bob Cannon, Catherine Matraves, Julia McHenry, Virginia Metallo, Don Stockdale, Patrick Sun, and Emily Talaga from the Office of Economics and Analytics. Padma Krishmaswamy from the Office of Engineering and Technology, Ken Carlberg, Jeffrey Goldthorpe, Deb Jordan, Lauren Kravitz, Nicole McGinnis, Senji Nakahawa, Erica Olson, and Austin Rendazzo from the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau, Pam Arlick, Michelle Burlove, Trent Harkrader, Melissa Droller-Kirkle, Jody May, Ronnie McDonald, Chris Monteith, and Terry Natoli from the Wireline Competition Bureau, Monica DeLong, Garnet Hanley, Susanna Larson, Jessica Quinley, and Joel Tabenblatt from the Wireless Telecommunication Bureau, and Matthew Dunn, Michelle Ellison, Doug Klein, Jacob Lewis, Scott Novak, Bill Richardson, Joel Rabinowitz, and Roy Sherlock from the Office of General Counsel. It really is a lot. Thank you to all of them. And with that, I'm going to ask if any of my colleagues would like to make any announcements at this time. Commissioner Carr.
Just one for me. I want to welcome and announce our spring intern. Got to figure out what season we're in. Michael Hadley. Like myself, I'm not there anymore. He is a 3L at Catholic University, Columbus School of Law, my alma mater is what I meant to say. Prior to law school, he served in the United States Army, both in South Korea and then later in the 82nd Airborne. With the second portion of that in mind, we definitely drop him in when there's thorny national security or other issues and know that he will be able to get that work done. After he graduates, he says he plans to stay in the D.C. area, take the Virginia bar, good luck with that, and pursue a career in federal service as an attorney. So I wish him all the luck on his continued interest in public service.
Thank you. Commissioner Starks, any announcements?
Nothing from me. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Symington.
I, too, have no announcements.
All right, I've got a little bit here. I want to announce a few things. First, David Horowitz is retiring later this month. He's served 35 years in the federal government, 34 of which were here at the FCC. And since 2003, David served as Assistant General Counsel in the General Counsel's Administrative Law Division. And in this capacity, he's been a team leader, providing counsel to all sorts of lawyers on agenda review items involving the Wireless Bureau, Public Safety Bureau, International Bureau, and Office of Engineering and Technology. And over these years, his leadership, and Team Horowitz, as it was known, has been responsible for mentoring so many of our general counsel's lawyers, including those who've taken on leadership positions in the agency itself and also more broadly in the communications bar. His familiarity with complex legal issues that were addressed by these bureaus and offices, well, it came from his prior work in other leadership positions at the Commission, including as chief of what was then called the Public Safety and Private Wireless Division, and as legal branch chief of the Policy and Rules Division of what was then called the Mass Media Bureau. So we wish him all the best, whether it's continuing to pursue his mastery of the law, the fiddle, the guitar, or his many other interests. Next, at the end of last month, you might have missed it, but an agency stalwart, Chris Monteith, left the FCC after 25 years of public service. Chris was the chief of the Wireline Competition Bureau, where she helped guide some of the most challenging work at the agency. And she is also known for her steady and supportive leadership, and she kept morale in the Bureau high during the pandemic and in the days before. But she actually had an impact in many other bureaus as well. During her career at the agency, she led the Enforcement Bureau and the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau, and she also served as the deputy chief of the Media Bureau. Chris was, you could say, the Swiss Army knife of the FCC. And it's true, while she played an integral part in so many different subject matter areas, I really think her most profound impact has been her mentoring and guiding so many other commission staff in their successful careers. I want to thank Chris for her dedication to the commission and the public interest and wish her the best. Finally, on a slightly different note, I want to acknowledge that the closing session of last week's ITU World Telecommunications Standardization Assembly, which I had the privilege to attend in part, the International Bureau's Ina Dekenak was selected as vice chair for ITU-T Study Group 3. And if that sounds technocratic, I want to tell you it's not. This study group works on international telecommunications economic and policy issues. And Ina has served as the U.S. head of delegation to Study Group 3 in the past. And now she is going to be well positioned to help lead this study group for the next study period. It's really important at the ITU that we support United States leadership. So congratulations, Ina. And I also want to thank the entire FCC and U.S. government team that attended and supported the Standardization Assembly in Geneva earlier this month. I also finally want to thank the large number of staff, some of whom are physically present today, some of whom are digitally present, who made it possible for us to hold this first meeting in the FCC's new headquarters. I appreciate everything that you have done to make this happen. And I look forward to many more meetings physically together in this room, in this building. All right, Madam Secretary, will you please announce the next date for the Commission's monthly agenda meeting?
The next agenda meeting of the Federal Communications Commission is Thursday, April 21st, 2022.
Until then, we stand adjourned.